I want to unmute you as well. Sorry. Okay, so thank you all so much for joining us for this is our fourth SEM Talk. It's a new series that we created. And I'm really excited tonight to have Clark Schweitzer here to talk about the history of the Wyoming Seminary Lower School. And just one second, I'm sorry. It's not letting me. Oh boy. Clark?
Yes.
Are you there?
I am.
Because I'm recording this, it's not letting me get to my other sheet to talk about your bio. So I'm really sorry about that. Did not foresee that little conflict. Do you mind if I spotlight you and I'll switch over to you to introduce yourself? Because it was quite the bio, but I don't want to do you any injustice by messing anything up.
Well, actually, I don't remember a whole lot of what was in the bio because it was written a while ago. So
well, maybe
I'll be happy to introduce myself.
Yeah, just introduce. Thank you so much.
Sure.
I'm going to add you to the spotlight now, and I'm so sorry about that. I didn't realize it would do that to me. Anyway, thank you all so much again for joining us, and here's Clark Schweitzer.
Well, as Liz mentioned my name, I've been at the school since 1976. Followed my illustrious colleague there, whom I really wish that I had a chance to know a lot better, Bob Bond, who was a legend at the school, and I was a newbie coming in to take that position, but could not fill his particular shoes. But Bob leaves a great legacy, and one of his students, Jay Harvey, is with us tonight too, and he can attest to Bob's prowess as a teacher and a basketball coach as well. And I do have a picture of Bob actually with some flag football teams. So if we can get that far, I'm not sure. I teach American history, 8th grade, since 1976. I've also taught 7th grade for a number of years, and 1 year I taught 5th grade as well. So tonight, in this particular presentation, after about 30-35 minutes, you'll probably be tired of hearing me talk, and we'll have some chance to have some questions, or if you have any comments or stories, they'd be wonderful to have. I'll probably get to about 1940 or so, maybe a little bit later. As I scroll through some of the pictures, we'll see how it goes. But thank you so much for zooming in tonight, and we're going to be starting with the history of the school on Public Square, about 1807. So this part of Wyoming Seminary predates the upper school, as it's now called, which was formed in 1844. So we're going to go back a little bit farther today. And I'm going to highlight 4 people: James Mackenzie, Elizabeth Rockwell, Bessie Garcelin Atwood, and Anna Miles Alcott. Some of you may have had Miss Atwood and Miss Alcott as teachers. Dr. Rockwell, probably not. She was back in the 1870s, and Mr. Mackenzie was about there as well. So no one is back there, I don't think, anyway, right? Yeah, okay. So a lot of the information that I have and I'm going to share with you is courtesy of a former student of the Wilkes-Barre Institute and then a beloved English teacher at the school, Winifred Shorts. And I think she retired about the same year I came along. So let's start with something that is familiar with all of us. I couldn't fit them in the picture of this mural, but there are 4 pictures on either side of the mural. And what those framed pictures have are lists of faculty members and board of trustees. Some of the names you would recognize: the Bowmans, the Cunninghams, and the Harveys, for example, are listed there as the trustees of these various institutions. There are 6 buildings here in this familiar picture to you. Alice Jenkins painted it in 1953, and it was retouched by Cathal O'Toole. And they were pretty painstaking about even the height of the trees, the colors of the um, buildings, and what the clothing the people were wearing. Each car and bicycle was researched to make sure that it was correct. And the mural itself is about 18 feet long and about 5 feet high. And when I show it to my students, they often ask, why is the river in the background? So you'll see the river is back here behind the buildings. And right back in here, which you can't see very well, is a breaker, reminiscent of our coal history. Well, one reason that it was painted like this is because 5 of the 6 buildings, these 5 in the background here, those are in Wilkes-Barre. And the center one, of course, is in 44. So we're going to start with the building on the left. And that is reminiscent of an academy called the Dana Academy. And it was not the first Wilkes-Barre Academy. That belongs over here in this building. But the Dana Academy was run by Sylvester Dana. He was the last principal of the first school, and his school was located near Academy Street on land that had been owned by his father. So I'm sure you, if you're familiar at all with some of the street names, Dana Street, for example, named for the family. And he took over the school after it was moved from Public Square, and then made the move to Dana Academy. Then to the 3-story building here in the mural, that's the Harry Hillman Academy. Harry Hillman donated land for a new school to be built. And that building is in memory of his son, Harry, who passed away while he was a student there. And so the name was changed from the Wilkes-Barre Academy to the Harry Hillman Academy. And from about in the early 1890s to about 1919, somewhere in there. And then it was changed back to Wilkes-Barre Academy. Now, this white building on the left here, that's the original academy on Public Square. We'll see that up close a little bit later, and I'll talk about some of the features of this particular building. Then if we go all the way over to the far right here, where you can follow my cursor over here, that's the Wilkes-Barre Institute. And that school started in 1854 and was originally known as the Wilkes-Barre Female Institute. There was also another school called the Wilkes-Barre Female Seminary. And for about 60 years or so, that school was named the seminary by misprints. So the word, the female seminary, oftentimes will be used in place of the female institute. So there is some confusion over how continuous the schools have been, but the institute got its start in 1854, and that will run all the way till 1939. The academy, these 3 buildings over here, they start in 1807, but there's going to be some lapses in there as well. So this next building over here, next to the original institute, that was Judge Woodward's home and on South Franklin Street. And Judge Woodward was actually the star pupil of Garrett Mallory, who was the first principal of the Wilkes-Barre Academy. And when Mallory left the school and he left the area, actually, he turned the school over to the Woodwards in that home. So, and then of course, the center school is when the institute, the buildings here on the right representing the institute, and the buildings here on the left, the academy, they merge in 1939, and it becomes known as the Wilkes-Barre Day School. And then in 1951, it becomes part of Wyoming Seminary and becomes Wyoming Seminary Day School. And that name will last until about 1980 when the lower school takes its place. Now, the one piece of information that I didn't put in at the moment, we'll get to it a little bit later, are these two buildings which represent the Institute. The teacher, Anna Miles Alcott, who takes over as principal in 1912 or so, she pushes for a new building because, as you can see, these two buildings, there's not much room for a gymnasium or a cafeteria or a science room or an art room, for example, or some of the other things that she wanted. And she pushed really hard for a new building. And so this building here in 44 is really a testimony to her pushing and the board's efforts to have this building erected. And so we're very fortunate to have people in our background of all of those board members and faculty who worked so tirelessly to provide the kind of education that they wanted for their students. So now on either side of the mural are those two framed pictures of the faculty members and the administration. One on the left for the academy, one on the right for the institute. But this is something maybe that you haven't seen very much of before. This was the mural before the current mural that we have. So that's what's in the mural room now, which wasn't always the mural room. That used to be a place for speakers to come and talk to the children or for them to practice their speeches outside of the auditorium that you might be familiar with. But this is the older mural. And you can see there are 5 buildings, 2 of the academy on the left and 2 of the institute on the right. And then the center one is what becomes the Wilkes-Barre Institute and then the Wilkes-Barre Day School and so on. Oh, and one other thing that I wanted to go back to this to show you is over here, you see a young man, he's carving initials into the tree. And those initials are AJ for Alice Jenkins. So my student said, is that her boyfriend? Well, could be, I don't know. Would have liked to have asked her to see what the interest was here, but that's her initials. And there's an older woman walking here. You can't see her very well, obviously, in this part of the picture, but it is thought that that is Miss Atwood, that Alice Jenkins put Miss Atwood in the mural, in part in there. And then you can't see it very well here, but it's let me see if I can do this. No, there's a rip right here where my cursor is. And that's because somebody kicked a ball and hit the mural and it ripped. And that was from former colleague, Sally Urisco, told me. And her name was Sally Thomas before she became, so you might remember that name. But they were playing ball as younger children there in that room, and it created a rip. So that's the part of the history of the mural. And you'll also notice in this mural the various people. These are the 1880s Victorian age. Up in here, here's a high wheel bicycle. And then, as I tell the kids, this in the 1950s became a safety bicycle because the high wheel was a little bit hard to ride. And a safety bicycle was easier and didn't have as many accidents. So here are the 1950s along here. And of course, the 1950s cars and so on, the horse and buggies over here in the 1850s. So this particular mural, this part of it, you'll notice the up at the top, the lights. I have one of those saved in my room just as a way of preserving that history. And you might remember the wooden auditorium seats. Anybody remember those? Well, I saved two of them from the dumpster, so they're in the room that Jill was referring to, where the old books were back there, and that's where uh, oh, Mrs. Condren uh, met her husband, and they shared a kiss in that room. She told me, and that was during 8th grade. And he later became her husband, Dr. Condren, and she, of course, just passed away a few months ago, I think it was. All right, so on we go. And these chairs, by the way, are still around as well. I haven't seen the table, but the chairs are still around. So that's quite a while ago. All right. Well, why am I not able to go? Well, we'll go over this way then. All right. So from 1807 to 1939, this particular piece, see the cupola here, this is a delineation. We think this has been added on. The original building was an old log jail and courthouse on Public Square. And this may have planked over that log jail, or it might be the new building that was built in 1809. So I haven't been able to ascertain that just at this moment. But this is representative of the building on Public Square in any case, built in 1807 when the Yankees came from Connecticut, and they were supposed to create an educational institution after they got other things settled, including a church as well. So that's why on Public Square is the Wilkes-Barre Meeting House, sometimes called Old Ship Zion, and that was next to the school. But this was a school where you had girls and boys. Girls go in one side, boys in the other. You see here one of the scholars outside of the window, and they had to build a fence around it because at one point in time, pigs came into the school and created a lot of excitement with the kids. So you can imagine if pigs are coming into your building, that must have been a real mess. So who knows if one of the kids left them into that place. So you can see this building now. General Lord Butler was the first president of Wilkes-Barre Academy. He was the son of Zebulon Butler, who was one of the principals in the Battle of Wyoming, and made it away on his horse with Nathan Dennison. And then here's just an information slide about Garrick Mallory. Here, he was from Yale, as you can read there. And then the first floor was for younger children of both sexes, and then the second floor was for the older children. And one of the most famous graduates is George Catlin. Now, many of you probably are familiar with his work of Native Americans. He was in Wilkes-Barre for a little bit and then became a lawyer, moved to Philadelphia, and then decided that his real passion was for painting Native Americans. And one of the first Americans, if not the first American, to have his work shown at the Louvre in Paris, and was an early proponent of national park system to help preserve the wildlife from that. And so this piece here on George Catlin, he was one of the early students there under Mallory, who later serves as a representative from Luzerne County in Pennsylvania. And he also introduced legislation for the North Branch Canal in 1827, 1828. So Catlin was one of the early scholars in a school that was well known for being one of the finest in Pennsylvania. In fact, no other school in 7 counties taught the higher branches of science and math. And they went to school from 9 in the morning to about noon, took a break for a couple of hours, and then came back from 2 to 5. And also went on Saturdays for half a day. Saturdays is when they would write They do a lot of writing, and on Wednesdays, that's when they would practice public speaking. So even in the earliest days, we have this pattern set of scholarship, of speaking, learning to speak in public, and arranging your thoughts and organizing and then writing. So from the earliest times, this is what we're still doing those kinds of things. Now we have Sylvester Dana. Let me see if I can get back here. He was the last principal, as I said earlier, and then he's going to choose a man by the name of James Mackenzie to run the new Wilkes-Barre Academy. But between the 1830s and 1878, when Mackenzie comes in, there comes to be known what's known as the Brick Academy, because that's what it was constructed of on Public Square, and half of it was for boys and half of it was for the girls. It was sold to make room for the new courthouse around the same time that was being sold in the late 1850s. We have the first horse-drawn rail cars and gas lines and new hospitals that are there as well. So it's Wilkes-Barre is on the move. And here's a picture of James Mackenzie. It's the only one that I've seen, and it's hanging in the hallway right by the third grade classrooms now. He was invited to become the head of the Wilkes-Barre Academy while he was still a senior at Lafayette. And you can see on the slide there, he arrived in Wilkes-Barre around 6 years old and with his mother. There was no mention of his father. And so he was sent to work in the coal breakers and eventually worked himself out of that, and goes to Phillips Andover, works his way through there, and then works his way through Lafayette. So he was about 25 years old by the time he was a senior at Lafayette, but very disciplined, and he was very motivated to become an excellent teacher. And that's one of the reasons why he was chosen to head Wilkes-Barre Academy. And he stays for a number of years and then goes on to head Lawrenceville. Later on, he's going to become a member of the National Education Committee to write curriculum for both the public and private schools in the country. So you can see that people who started at the helm of the school really had a strong affinity for excellence and working hard, being disciplined for that. And here you can see some of his innovations, where baseball is starting and football and crew and the declamations and the colors of the school, cardinal and black. And he establishes a debate society, the Linonia, which comes out of Harvard. So he was following that. And this, the Harry Hillman Academy drawing, there's a great 3-story school and was continuing in the tradition of excellence. Here is one of the early football pictures. Now, I left some of the names on there. I don't know if you can see them or not. Bogart, Landmesser, Troxel, Ingham, Schmidt, Ward, Hutchins, Hitchler, MacDonald, Fuller, Williams. It's dated as 1900. And there's a picture of the basketball team, Harry Hillman. A group of nice young gentlemen. And then the Harry Hillman drama production, 1910. And I think that's something that runs in both schools as well. The Academy and the Institute both have strong affinity for getting the student involved in plays, in drama, in speaking, in oratory. You'll notice that Harry Hillman was for boys only. So the young ladies, so to speak, that you see in the picture are actually boys dressed as young ladies. I don't know what the name of the play is, but here's another one called Spreading the News around 1910. And then the Football 11. And I love this picture of it's around the 8th grade year. They're graduating, the Wilkes-Barre Academy graduating class in 1924. I like that because all the knickers. So I have some knickers in my room that the students can see. We don't often see those today, obviously, but back then there was quite the fad, and all of them have very similar coats except this young lad here. He's got his 3 buttons, but he's missing the belt. So I don't know. Everybody else has a belt on except that young lad. But they're all spiffed up. And this was their newspaper, or their the articles that they wrote were in what was called the Academy Whiz Bang. If only we were the boys our mothers think we are, and that Mr. Damon, who was the principal, wishes we were. I love that quote. So they must have been quite a handful for Mr. Damon. But those particular articles are written by the students, and there's all kinds of short stories and poems and things that they would publish. It's a great resource for that. And then we have the junior ones. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm drawn right to this young man right here. I love his collar. And as my students would say, he doesn't look like he wants to be photographed. I'm going, yeah, that's true. I think he'd rather be somewhere else. And there's a picture of Miss Atwood in the midst there. You might recognize the name Bittenbender as well, right? And their association with the school, Dr. Bittenbender. All right, and so we're off to the Wilkes-Barre Institute, 1850, 1854. This is a group from the First Presbyterian Church, formed the Wilkes-Barre Female Seminary, and then becomes the Wilkes-Barre Female Institute, and they wanted it to be a school of the very highest order. So this is a picture of the school on South River Street. And the land that the school was built on was owned by George Hollenbach and Henry Fuller. The Hollenbach family, obviously, Hollenbach Golf Course, Hollenbach Cemetery. They are pretty well known in northeastern Pennsylvania. In fact, Matthias was in the Battle of Wyoming and escaped out of that tragic event and made his way across the river and then down into Fort Wilkes-Barre at the time. So it was his relation there, George. And there was a lot of frequent changes in teachers and principals, and prosperity as well would go up and down. Very often the principal's salary was tied to the number of students that were in there. So there was such frequent changes that they decided that instead of having just a girls' institution, they would invite boys in as well. So boys were allowed in under the tutelage of Reverend Parson. And when the principals of Wilkes-Barre Female Institute changed hands again, they merged the boys and the girls. And then the school was moved to Judge Woodward's house over on South Franklin Street. But no matter, I felt sorry for the boys because they were going to the Wilkes-Barre Female Institute. It was known as FemSem until about 1899, and I'm sure the boys were happy when the female part was changed. All right, here's Judge Woodward's house, which that served as the institute. And here you can see the young people rolling the hoops down the street, right? And here's the carriage going back and forth, and girls would either walk to the school, or there were some rooms if they needed to board. They could board there as well. And then we have Dr. Rockwell coming up. This is Dr. Rockwell. And if you think about it, by around 1914, we only had 6% of the population in the United States that even went to high school. So for a female to have gone to high school was very rare, let alone to have earned a doctorate degree. But she was, from what I understand and what I've read, she was of the highest caliber, was a disciplinarian, but also very personable, and just loved her work with children, and very highly regarded by the trustees and the students. The students were convinced she could speak at least 6 different languages. And Latin was required all 4 years. And by 1881, girls as young as 8 were admitted. And although the country was going, and probably in part because the country was going through a financial depression and the rates were reduced. So she's responsible for starting kindergarten too. And I thought you might like to look at this. Elsie Butler's report card. So pretty good, but this is the one that I was looking at, is deportment, how you are conducting yourself. 97.8. So are you sitting properly? Are you walking properly? Are you not talking too loudly? And so on, my students, when I point out this report card, are going, you mean you actually had to sit a certain way? You had to walk a certain way? You mean you couldn't yell? No, that's all how you carry yourself there. So this too is from the Wilkes-Barre class of 1888. Young ladies about to start off on the adventure of a lifetime, so to speak, for them. Great picture. All right. And here's the younger group, where now we're concerned about them getting enough fresh air. They were as well back in that time period. And getting to school and departing from school were about the only opportunities for physical activity. So they could walk up and down the sidewalk, but no farther than a half a block from the school. So there wasn't much room for physical activity. And that's one of the reasons why Anna Miles Alcott is going to push for a new building, because the girls could jump rope and they could play tag, but they couldn't kick a ball around because of the street and the close proximity of that. So here's Anna Miles Alcott. I love this quote that she said: "There never was greater need for genuine, far-reaching education than there is today, when people need to understand each other and the world's historic background in order to bring fellowship and maintain peace." Isn't that a great quote? So these are the kinds of leaders that the school has had from its inception. And under Anna Miles Alcott, just tell you a quick story. She started at the school in around in the mid 1890s, and at 95, 96, somewhere in there. And she remembers Dr. Rockwell meeting her at the train station and taking her to a boarding house on North Franklin Street, where the room and board was $5 a week. And she didn't have a penny to her name. So that was provided for her. I imagine maybe it was deducted from her salary or something, but Wilkes-Barre at the time didn't have electric lights. Market Street Bridge was a wooden bridge going across the river. There were no cars, no radios, of course. But she said, Wilkes-Barre, and I'm going to quote from her words, "Wilkes-Barre had a cordiality and a warmth here that wasn't in any other place. They didn't ask you what you had or how much you had. They asked you what you could do. They took me as a friend. All over the United States, I never met in my life more wonderful people than were in Wilkes-Barre at the time." So I thought, wow, that's what a nice thing to say. And it was under her direction that people like Helen Keller came to speak. She, Anna Miles Alcott, loved to have speakers that were nationally known. And they would come and speak at the Wilkes or the Iron Temple. You can see there on the flyer. They would speak at the Iron Temple. So Helen Keller came along with her. What was the name of her helper there? I can't think of it, but she's pictured there. I can't think of the name of Helen Keller's teacher.
I think it was Sullivan.
Yeah, Anne Sullivan. Thank you. So she brought Anne Sullivan, and William Howard Taft, the former president, came along with university presidents. The great contralto would come, singers and poets and professors and humorists. They would come and speak to the community, all at the behest of Anna Miles Alcott. And so the school was really known far and wide as a place where intellectual stimulation was had. And that was due in large part to Anna Miles Alcott. Here's a picture of the basketball team. They beat Seminary in 1915, just saying, 22-5. And you can notice that the girl holding the ball, she's probably the best one to see at the moment. She has bloomers on. This was their uniform. They had black bloomers and a white midi here, and their kerchiefs. Kerchiefs were yellow, and you'll see that in a moment. And I love this little prank that was pulled. About 1909, Limburger cheese was spread on the radiators, creating such a stench the next day that school was canceled. In 1919, the same prank was tried again, but Miss Alcott was now the head of the school, and everyone had to stay in their room for the day. That must have been a stinky day. Miss Alcott was also instrumental in bringing Montessori education to the school. Here's a picture of the Montessori class in around 1914. But Marie Montessori had just developed her ideas and brought them out to the public by 1913. And here we are in 1914, we're already introducing a class for that. So that is, again, testimony to being on the cutting edge of education. Here's the school uniform I was referring to earlier. Miss Alcott agreed in 1916 to the suggestion of Lucille Harvey. I don't know if that's related to Jay or not, but she was a third academic student, that the student body be divided into two teams named for the school colors, blue and gold. And that's when Miss Alcott came up with the saying, a sound mind and a sound body. And that's when she was pushing for the new building. And this is the class of 1924. And they were taken to area businesses like the Times Leaders and the Greater Wilkes-Barre Industrial Engineers expositions. They went to various businesses and learned about what life in the real world was like. And here's a picture of the school. You can see it was about little over $500,000. And as they're coming into the building in the mid-20s, 1924, 25, 26, they're contributing all this money, raising it to get that building built. They had studied for a year to find out what was the best kind of building to build, and then how would they put together all of the rooms, and what would the rooms be used for, and how would it be heated. It took them a year to put all of that together. Miss Alcott contributed $17,000 of her own salary. And then when it was went into the Depression in the 30s there, she offered to donate about 10% of her salary back. But of course, at that time, they're making only between $1,600 and less than $3,000 a year. So she also advocated for fresh vegetables from area farms. Here's a picture of the art studio. And then cooking class. Isn't that great? Because she had a room equipped with stoves and counters and sinks for the cooking class. And because preparatory to her meant not only academically, but preparation for life. And so she even advocated for a school bank so the students could learn about the intricacies of that, as well as what we would now say is home economics. But here you can see the gas stove. Here, there's one here, and there's one over here, and there's one behind this young lady right in this area, and another one. So there were four stoves, and here's another one there. And when I came, there was they were down to one stove, but they still had sinks and so on in cooking class. And then here's their science room, the science lab, and then the sewing class. And between sewing class, this was in the school in 40 Fort. But the girls during World War I, when they were in Wilkes-Barre, they had knitted sweaters and mufflers and socks and squares for quilts, which were all mailed to the 109th Field Artillery, and of course they were fighting in France at the time. And this is, I think, the South Study Hall on the second floor. When I came, the North Study Hall looked very similar to that. I think we had close to 40 desks in that room. And study hall was quiet. No working with everybody. Everybody had to do their own work. And here's weaving and basketry. I wish we had those now. And here is the library. This is now my classroom. I'm very fortunate to have that as a classroom. This, you can't see it very well, but where my cursor is a room which became the magazine room. And I think this is the room that Jill was talking about, where there are a lot of old books in this. This desk, right where my cursor is, this desk is still there. That's the desk that I would use. Now I'm sharing the room with several other colleagues because of the COVID. However, the desk is still there. And this table that the librarian is seated at is still in the room, along with these tables. There are still 2 of these tables left and a number of the wooden chairs that are still left from when the school was built. So they're nearly 100 years old and still being used. Now, the quality of the materials that were used, just really well done. All right. Anybody remember this? Taking a nap. There's a little sign now by the kindergarten, and when they're taking a nap, it says, "You wake them, you take them." And the cafeteria. This predates me a bit, but when I came, that was probably the cafeteria, but there weren't square tables, there were round tables. And the faculty ate with the students. Now we have those long benches, long tables that we eat at. It's not family style, which I personally miss a lot. And playtime, that's what back campus looked like. And then we had some tragedy here with the challenges of the Great Depression, fire, and the mine subsidence. And right after the school was built, 3 years later, bang, we have the Great Depression hitting. And at around that same time, when the girls were about to go into the auditorium at some point, I think it was the week before the 75th anniversary, that's what it was. The the mounting debts and the depression were just overwhelming the school. And as the girls were lining up for an assembly, a light exploded on the stage, which caused a fire. And the grand piano, as you can see, there was a total loss. In the same year, in the fall of that year in 1930, the southwest corner of the building sank due to mine subsidence. So cracks were appearing in the walls and across the blackboards in that corner of the building. Windows and doors were jamming, the floors and the radiators were tilting. So coal engineers had to be called in to say, is the whole school going to sink into the mines? But they said, although the repairs would be troublesome, the school should be safe. So there hasn't been any settling since then, even through the 1972 flood. So here again is the drama team from the Wilkes-Barre Institute. So we had it on the Wilkes-Barre Academy side, and now it's on the Institute side, playing tennis. And there's your hockey team. And this one I thought you might find interesting. I hope you can see part of that. How to win and lose points. The school was divided into the two teams, and you could win a point for each subject you had above 90 for the week. You got a point if all subjects were between 80 and 90 for the week. 5 points if they were between 90 and 100. And if you got a 90 on a monthly test, you got 1 point, 2 points for 100 in any subject. You know, we're keeping the standards pretty high. And then 5 extra points for the side, which keeps absolute silence for 1 week. Wow. Wow. I don't know if we would have anybody winning any points now for keeping silent. And 10 points if neither late nor absent for the whole year. 20 points for the banner carrier at commencement. And you could lose a point for each subject if you were between 50 and 69, and 2 points, and so on and so forth. If you had an unexcused lateness, you'd lose points, and so on. And sometimes they were announced in assembly. So not very cognizant of how people are feeling, so to speak. Here's an early lacrosse team. And then the Wilkes-Barre Day School. So a few more slides and we'll see this. The Wilkes-Barre Day School comes into being because the Wilkes-Barre Institute and the Wilkes-Barre Academy had less than 50 students each. And because they were going under financially, Bruce Payne actually orchestrated a way for them to come together, and they created the Wilkes-Barre Day School. And that lasted from 1939 to 1951. And Miss Atwood was one of the principals of that. Here's some of the students in the foyer. Hockey team. Basketball. That's the gym that when I first came there, we used to play on. I think Bob Bond was the basketball coach there, and I remember the old hump in the in the gymnasium floor. That was kind of our little secret weapon there. We knew where the hump was, right? And I like the self-confidence, sound judgment, responsible leadership. Because those were key phrases that had guided the school from its inception to now, developing self-confidence, sound judgment, and responsible leadership as we're working along. And those students coming down on a wooden slide. Ouch. I don't know if there were any splinters or not, but I don't think I'd like to be the nurse taking care of all of that. And this is May Day out in front of the school. You'll see the 3 steps that are no longer there. One of the graduating classes on a beautiful day, along with all the rest of the younger kids. So this is a school photo. And here's your going around the maypole. Isn't that cute? on the front lawn, and we're still doing that. I love the fact that we still have those traditions. And then student council. And this is one of the events that the school used to do, is invite other schools to come and visit. And this was Penn Hall Junior College, Valley Forge Military Academy, Blair Academy, and Wyoming Seminary were our guests. So they brought those schools together and had a dance and tea and former. So it was a formal dinner dance, and so it was really a great way of getting those students mixing with other schools. Here's some basketball scores. See, day school 21, Wyoming Seminary 18. And then look at the following one, day school 31 and Wyoming Seminary 30. So for sure. Now up here is where Wyoming Seminary takes the hockey 1-0. So there's our football team from the Wilkes-Barre Day School. No face masks. And the tattletale. Three-legged races at field day. And there's our faculty, 1951. You might remember Mrs. Culp. Remember? Where is she? Here she is, Mrs. Culp. You might remember her. Jackson Bird was the headmaster, as they were called at that time. And then there's Mrs. Bittenbender, Mrs. Aston. You might remember her, those of you who went there, Mrs. Mack, right? And there's Miss Atwood. In that picture, here's Miss Atwood right here. And this picture obviously is in the library right in front of the fireplace. So we have a little bit of time every day. So that takes us right to when it becomes joined to the Wyoming Seminary. We at the Wilkes-Barre Day School, I think their graduating class at one time only had 3 students in it. And so it was felt best to join with Wyoming Seminary, and then Wyoming Seminary would be one of the earliest institutions to have all the way from kindergarten through 12th grade, and adding postgraduate and the toddler sections in later years. But that finishes my presentation. I have more slides to go. That's Payne Pettibone and kindergarten, but I thought you might, without much commentary, these young ladies, I don't know if anybody recognizes them. Those 3 young girls, Susan Hendel, Jessie Cunningham, and Bonnie Burnside.